Lisa had just finished a night out with friends. Her taxi pulled up. A black sedan, the driver, a man in his 40s, smiled too much. She got in. At first everything seemed normal, then came the questions. "So, where do you live? Got a boyfriend?" asked the driver. No reply from Lisa, so he asked another question. "Do you take taxi alone often?" Something about his tone made her very uneasy, but she brushed it off for now. Halfway through the ride, Lisa noticed something. The GPS. It turned off. The roads, unfamiliar. Then the car turned, off the main road, into an empty construction site. Her pulse pounded. "This isn't the right way," Lisa murmured. "No worries, it's a shortcut," said the driver, smiling at her in a creepy way. Her stomach twisted. Lisa texted her friend, her location. Her fingers trembled. The car reached the stop sign. She grabbed the door handle. Click! Child lock. She was trapped. Silence. The car slowed down. The sound of Lisa's shaky breathing was becoming loud. Lisa had to think fast. She clutched her stomach, gagged. I think I'm going to throw up," she said with a trembling voice to the driver. The driver hesitated, then click. The lock released. Lisa bolted. She ran. Luckily a car was passing by, a lifeline to her at that moment. The fake taxi sped off into the shadows of the night. Lisa reported the driver, but when the police searched, he wasn't in the system. The taxi account, fake. The name, fake. A ghost in the system, someone using different names, different faces, to trap passengers. He was never caught. And some nights, Lisa swears she still sees a black sedan idling outside her window, waiting for her to book a ride. Jacob had been driving for hours that night. When the next ride request came in, he pulled up to a dimly lit street corner. She was already waiting. A woman dressed in all white, her face oddly pale. She didn't speak, just typed the address into the app. As he drove, he felt it. Something was wrong. Jacob stole a glance in the mirror. She sat completely still. Even when the car jolted from a pothole, she didn't react. He swallowed hard. Jacob asked her, "Long night?" No response from her. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers motionless. The air inside the cab was getting colder and colder. Then he saw it. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. The red light ahead flickered. Jacob chanced another look. Her head hadn't moved, still staring straight ahead, but her lips still moving. A whisper with no voice, his grip tightened on the wheel. A deep chill settled in his bones. They reached the destination, a house that looked abandoned. Jacob exhaled, relieved, almost over. Then for the first time, she turned her head toward him, slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. No words. Just a stare that sent ice through his veins, and then She was gone, stepping into the darkness. Jacob sighed, gripping the wheel. Then he saw it. Something on the back seat, a crumpled note. He reached for it with shaking hands. The message, 6 words, "You're lucky I changed my mind." Tony had been driving all night, picking up passengers across town. Then a ride request from a passenger on his phone. The ride request was for a rural location, far, far away from the city lights. Tony hesitated at first, but accepted the ride request. When he pulled up, a man in his 50s climbed in, old leather jacket, cigarette smoke clinging to him. The door clicked shut and the car somehow suddenly felt colder. The ride was mostly quiet. Until the old man muttered, "Not many drivers come out this far anymore." "Why's that?" Tony asked. The man smiled, a slow, knowing, chilling smile. The old passenger whispered, "Strange things happen out here." Tony felt strange. The drop-off was a dirt road leading deep into the woods. The GPS announces approaching destination on Tony's phone. Tony slowed the car. He turned to ask for directions, and then his stomach dropped. The back seat was empty. The car interior was eerily quiet, the back seat now hauntingly empty. He suddenly pulled over. Checked the doors, still locked. No footprints, no sign at all that anyone had ever been there. Tony grabbed his phone. He checked the trip details, but there was no record of the ride. The next day he stopped at a gas station nearby. Tony mentioned what happened to the gas station manager. The manager's face went pale. He replied, "You're not the first to pick him up." The gas station manager leaned in, told Tony the story that years ago a driver took the same trip, but the man in the leather jacket never made it home. He died in a crash on that very road. Now drivers still pick him up, and he always vanishes before he gets home. As Tony walked towards his cab, he saw headlights appear in the distance and a faint figure standing by the roadside, probably waiting for his next ride. Emily was leaving a party late that night. The streets were nearly empty. Just her, the glow of streetlights and the distant hum of traffic. She pulled out her phone and ordered a taxi. A black sedan pulled up just minutes later. The driver rolled down the window. "Emily?" asked the driver. She nodded and got in. As they drove, something felt wrong. Emily glanced at the GPS on her phone. The route didn't match. They weren't heading toward her dorm. She glanced up at the driver's phone. It was dark, no navigation, no ride confirmation. Her stomach dropped. Where are we going?" she asked the driver. The driver didn't answer. Instead, he smiled, not a reassuring smile, a cold, knowing one. That's when Emily noticed something even worse. The doors had no handles from the inside. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She wasn't in a taxi she booked. She wasn't in the right car. Her fingers flew across her phone screen. She typed, "Help, wrong car." She hit send. No reply from anyone. The driver kept driving. The car suddenly stopped at a red light. A chance. Emily lunged, yanking the steering wheel with all her strength. The car swerved violently into another lane. The driver screamed. For a moment, everything was chaos. Somehow she crawled into the front seat, fumbled for the lock, and ran. She burst into a gas station, breathless, shaking. The employees at the gas station called the police. Police arrived, and when they checked her taxi app, there was no record of a ride. Her real taxi driver had just arrived, stuck in traffic, running late. The man who had picked her up, he was never found. Security footage showed the black sedan speeding away, disappearing into the night. No license plate, no driver, no explanation. Emily never took a rideshare alone again. But sometimes, late at night, she swore she could still hear a car pulling up behind her. Mark had driven the night shift for years. He'd seen all kinds of passengers, but that night something was different. She was already waiting, standing perfectly still. The rain didn't seem to touch her. She barely spoke, just whispered an address and said, "I just need to get home." Something was wrong. In the mirror she wasn't clear, blurred, fading in and out like a glitch. He told himself it was just the night playing tricks on him. But in his car, the air was colder now. Much, much colder. The radio, Mark hadn't touched it, yet it whispered something beneath the noise, something unspeakable, distorting noises. "Long night, huh?" she whispered in his ears. Mark blinked. He looked back at the road. When he glanced back again, the seat was empty. She was gone, but the doors never opened. The seat belt was still fastened. Mark suddenly pulled over, hands shaking. He looked back, heart pounding. The air felt heavy, uneasy, like someone was still there. He still continued driving, following the address she gave. He didn't even know why. His breath is shaky. The road seems longer than it should be. The address, he thought, maybe she was just a trick of his mind. He finally reached at the address. "You saw her, didn't you?" an old man whispered, sitting on the porch of a withered house, looking at a framed photograph of a young woman in a white dress. Mark felt his stomach drop. It was her, the young women in the photograph. The old man then said in a low voice, "She was my daughter. She died 5 years ago, hit by a car, waiting for her ride." Mark's jaw dropped. He never dared to drive past that cemetery again. Mark forever remembered the chills of that night.